afternoon, everybody. I acknowledge the Honourable Pamela Kumar, the Fiji Minister for Industry, Trade and Tourism, the Honourable Lautafi Theo Selafi Purcell of Samoa, Minister for Commerce, Industry, Trade and Labour, the Honourable Jeremiah Manele of the Solomon Islands, the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, the moderator for this afternoon's session, Professor Paul Alwalia, the USB Vice Chancellor, and Crystal Pratt, the Deputy Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum. Before we start, just a couple of safety notices. You will note that we have having some difficulties with utilities with regards to power and water, so please bear with us. If the power goes off, it will come on very quickly thereafter. Lecturers, students of USB, members of the Diplomatic Corps, colleagues and friends. I now call on Deputy Secretary General Crystal Pratt to say a few words on behalf of the Secretary General. Thank you.
Honourable Ministers, Vice-Chancellor of the University of the South Pacific, Excellencies and representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, Pacific Scholars of the University of the South Pacific, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to convey the sincerest of apologies from the Pacific Islands Forum Secretary General Dame Meg Taylor, who is unable to join you this evening due to a sudden illness. She intends to join the formal ministerial sessions of the Pacific ACP Trade Ministers and thereafter the Forum Trade Ministers meetings, which will take place tomorrow and the day after. Further, may I take this opportunity to commend the Government of Fiji and in particular the Ministry of Trade and Tourism and the Honourable Pamela Kumar for the hosting hospitalities of the Forum Trade Ministers and related meetings, and indeed for the convening of this invaluable high-level panel dialogue to have frank and constructive exchanges on the role of regional cooperation in transforming our island economies into thriving and competitive economies, which is at the heart of the theme for this year's Forum Trade Ministers meeting, the theme, Pacific Trading Nations, from surviving to thriving. Honourable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, our leaders have endorsed the Blue Pacific narrative as the core driver of collective action to advance the region's vision of peace, harmony, security, social inclusion and prosperity for our Pacific peoples. Our collective power and solidarity on trade and development matters are important to accelerate sustainable and inclusive economic development. Honourable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, the region meets here in Fiji this week at a time when multilateralism is under significant threat. Geopolitical interest in our region continues to strengthen, and at a time where there is a strengthening appetite by our own island nations to determine and advance our own development and priorities. This seminar presents an important opportunity to reflect on the ways and means through which we, Pacific Island nations, can leverage the growing opportunities available to us through advancing technological capabilities and evolving globalization to advance our collective interests as a strong bloc with our global partners. This afternoon, we have the opportunity to discuss these and other issues with the Honourable Ministers from Samoa, Solomon Islands, and, of course, from Fiji. I encourage you all to use this rare opportunity to engage with our Forum Trade Ministers during the discussion session. Again, I warmly welcome you to this esteemed panel discussion, and I look forward to the active engagement about to take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, this high-level panel discussion is centered around the theme of Pacific trading nations from surviving to thriving. It is held jointly under the auspices of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Tourism of Fiji, the University of South Pacific, and the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. With those remarks, may I invite the moderator for this high-level panel discussion, the USB Vice-Chancellor, to say a few welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Ministers, the Deputy Secretary General of I.T.S, Excellencies, Pacific Island Forum member delegates, staff and students of USB, ladies and gentlemen. I join our Deputy I.T.S Secretary General to welcome you all to this high-level ministerial panel discussion. And just at the outset, I will point out that Minister Ralph, unfortunately, although he's on the screen there to be a member of the panel today, is unable to be with us. So my special thanks to the ministers who are on the panel for discussing the theme, as we've pointed out, Pacific trading nations from surviving to thriving. And I also welcome all ministers and excellencies who are in the audience this afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to such a large number of distinguished new regional ministers to USB, which of course is your own university, being the Regional University of the South Pacific. I wish to begin by acknowledging the contributions and support of our member countries, our development partners, and engagement from our regional and international partners. This university would not be what it is without all these people. And this enables the university to deliver its higher education, research, and crop regional integration mandate. And it's with your enabling support that we're able to deliver knowledge and build capacities for our Pacific peoples. The university has identified key areas in its strategic plan for 2019 to 2021, and this, I'm confident, will ensure that we're preparing the next generation of Pacific Islanders to be responsive and able to meet the needs of our countries in coming decades. Two key areas for us, of course, are education and health. They're not only challenges, but opportunities in the region going forward. A healthy and educated population, of course, we believe, is vital to our future success as a region. And we're acutely aware that our mission cannot be accomplished in isolation, but requires partnerships with our national stakeholders in the region and, of course, our development partners. We've just begun our academic year this last week, and our student numbers are showing a significant increase, especially our new enrollments. And this increase, of course, is a result of the recognition that USB continues to be the premier university in the Pacific. It is also our commitment to the ongoing, it's also a commitment to the ongoing government support that our student body receives. And in particular, Minister, I want to thank the Fiji government for its continued support of USB. This high-level panel is a side event to the Forum Trade Ministers and related meetings, which Christelle talked about, which is hosted by the Fiji government this week. And as part of that hosting responsibility, we want to thank particularly the Honourable Pramila Kumar and the Secretary General of I.T.S for the organization of this event at USP. The event is very important not only to Forum country members, but it is also important really to all our stakeholders and community at the university. And I'm sure the deliberations during this high-level discussion will permeate into the ministers' meetings over the next 2 days. And as Christelle just pointed out, there's never a more important time given the dwindling sort of things that are happening to multilateralism. USB is honored to be given a chance to host this event, and events like this really provide the university with the opportunity to inculcate a strong sense of Pacific consciousness amongst our students. And I'm sure they will have some opportunity later when we open up for questions to interact with our esteemed guests this evening. But now let me introduce our panel. And I could have gone on forever given the CVs of the three panelists we have tonight. They are such esteemed ministers, and I'm sure this is a great opportunity for all of us to hear from them. But I'll begin by introducing the Honorable Pramila Kumar, the Minister for Industry, Trade, Tourism, Local Government, Housing and Community Development. Minister Kumar started her career as a teacher and quickly rose through the ranks of the education sector before transitioning to policy, serving as a government environmental advocate and later an investment manager at Fiji Islands Trade and Investment Bureau, now Investment Fiji. She then moved on to become the CEO of the Consumer Council of Fiji, a leadership role that she held for over 12 years. Minister Kumar was honored with the Executive Woman of the Year Award in 2015 by Women in Business, and the Fiji Times named her as the most influential woman of the year in 2010. We're indeed grateful to have the pleasure of the Honourable Minister's presence at USP today. The Honourable Lotafi Fio Salafi Purcell is the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Labour and the Minister for Public Enterprises since the establishment of the Ministry of Public Enterprises in 2015. Minister Purcell led Samoa's delegation to its first World Trade Organization Trade Policy Review in April 2019 and the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires. At MC11, he spoke on behalf of the Pacific Island countries on the importance of a positive outcome of the fisheries subsidies negotiations in the interests of the Pacific. He is also a member of the New Zealand Institute of Auditors and affiliates with local and international associations and corporations. Welcome, Honourable Minister. And third, we have Minister Manele, who is a seasoned diplomat, having started his diplomatic career in 1993 in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and External Trade, and having served as a counselor and chargé d'affaires at the Solomon Islands Permanent Mission to the United Nations in New York. He received his Foreign Service training at Oxford University in the United Kingdom, and Minister Manele later became the Assistant Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and External Trade and Deputy Secretary to the Prime Minister before he became the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and External Trade and Ministry for Development, Planning and Aid Coordination. We also welcome you, Minister, to this esteemed panel. As moderator, my role is simply to conduct the proceedings this afternoon. And what I intend to do is to invite each of our ministers to give some introductory remarks, which will set the scene for our subsequent discussion. So I'm thinking between 5 and 6 minutes. And then I think we will have some questions, depending on what sort of time we have and participation. So there'll be some questions from me, but also I'm hoping there'll be a lot of questions from the audience. And finally, because this is such an interactive session and we really want to encourage that interaction with everybody on the panel this evening, can I just request that when we do get to that we really be very focused rather than making another speech yourself. I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, that does happen at events like this, so I just would like to point that out right at the start. I mean, it's very generous that these ministers have agreed to come here, so I hope that we'll all we'll keep the decorum. So with those opening remarks, I'm actually going to go back and have a seat, and I'm going to begin from the furthest, which will be our Honourable Minister from Samoa, to start our proceedings this evening. So we'll ask him. And Minister, you're welcome either to use the podium to make some opening remarks or really to sit from the chair where you are, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Thank you, moderator, and I'd like to say hello to my fellow ministers. thank you for the invitation for Samoa to be involved in this session tonight. As we have heard, the world trade atmosphere in the world right now is at a point where it could be at crisis point. And where do we all fit in to this argument between multilateralism and protectionism? The WTO, which is the World Trade body that is supposed to be regulating trade throughout the world, free trade, and ensure that we all have our chances to trade freely throughout the world, is right now under siege from different factions in different countries and from within WTO itself. Now, where does that leave us as a small region in the world? Well, we are part of that trading world. We are part of the exchange of trading goods that determines our economic development. And where the world goes with their trade ideas, we have to try and fit in. In most cases, we will fit in. But in some cases, we have to make sure that our ideas about how trade should be conducted fits in with our ideas of our region. We have several trade agreements that will be discussed in our forum for our region. Some have been around. One has been around for a while. Our PICTA. We have the PACER Plus that we will be considering for some of the Pacific nations, and also the APAs. These are important times for us. How we enter into those policies and agreements and determine how we do our trade in the next 20 or 50 years. So we have to make sure that we get it right. If we don't, then we'll into an agreement that could find us in the back foot in the future. Don't forget that what we determine now determines our future. And we cannot lose our identity as Pacific people, a Pacific region. We have to ensure that whatever agreements and the global agreements we enter into, that the world knows that the Pacific region is here and is here to stay, and we will not change because of pressures that they put on us. That's just the opening remarks, and I hope that we will be able to answer more questions about the topic of today. I think the Pacific region is a thriving region, but we have to make sure that our policies and agreements are aligned. There are issues, social issues, that also we need to look deeply into. I refer to matters of health. We have to make sure that our agreements are aligned with the Pacific health issues, the NCDs, which is becoming a crisis for us all. So hopefully we will be able to have some ideas as we progress our program tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Manele, to the podium, please.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor or the moderator. First of all, let me join other colleagues in thanking the Fiji government for this initiative, and of course the Forum Secretariat and the USP. It's a pleasure to be here. The Samoan minister has alluded to the pressures that are facing the WTO. I would like to briefly remind us of the context, the context of our island countries. And I think this is important in terms of the theme, from surviving to sustainably thriving. As we all know, we are large ocean states. We are remote, distance from markets, the cost of communication and electricity or power in terms of industry and trade is high for a number of our countries. Although we are all part of the Pacific, but it is also important to note that we are also at slightly different stages and levels of government. And hence, the need for us to work together. The issue of capacity has been a challenge for many of our countries, hence the importance of regionalism and regional cooperation. And in terms of trade, as we have heard, there are a number of trading arrangements that are there, which are important in terms of encouraging economic development and economic integration for our countries. But also important is the need for us, regional cooperation or regionalism means or entails that we have shared goals and values. But it also demands unwavering commitment from all of us to work together to implement these shared goals and values. And I think this is in line with the Pacific Blue Principles, which calls for the collective empowerment of Pacific states to work together. Trade, as we all know, is important for development of our countries. International trade has contributed significantly to developments worldwide, hence the importance of the WTO, as we have heard, and which we are going to discuss later. We'll also discuss later, I understand, what we can do as countries to help the private sector or the industries to come up with products or to compete. Some of us may have market access under the various trading arrangements that we have, but we do not have the products that are competitive to sell to these markets. So I thought I'd just make those opening remarks. I look forward to further discussions on these areas in terms of regional cooperation and the various trading arrangements we have. What is at stake in terms of the WTO being a rule-based framework and our participation in terms of the WTO, but also what can we do as countries to support the private sector in our countries to be able to be effectively to participate, to compete, to ensure that there is sustainability in terms of our trade and economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now invite the Honourable Minister from Fiji.
Honourable Ministers, Vice Chancellor and the moderator for today, the Deputy Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I take this opportunity to thank the Honourable Ministers for agreeing to be part of this panel. And in a very short time, we were able to put this program together. And so I'm very grateful to you, and once again, welcome to Fiji. And I look forward to further discussions that we'll be holding in the next 2 days. And I also like to welcome the audience who are here today. I would like to focus on the theme, and the theme is about Pacific trading nations from surviving to thriving. If you seriously go deeper into this theme, you will realize that we are focusing really on our past, our present, and our future. And we are surviving with many challenges around us. The challenges are, we're all familiar with climate change as being number one challenge for us, and how we're going to deal with it. With recent cyclones that we had, we know for sure that these cyclones has actually wiped out a great percentage of our GDP. So each time the cyclone comes, we have to bounce back and get our life together. Then the other challenge we have is more to do with the trading rules, the global trading rules, which is shifting, which is changing. We can see unilateral decisions being made, a shift from multilateral to protectionism. The countries who are trying to protect themselves, trying to look for loopholes within the system. Today, WTO is being questioned, and its effectiveness is being questioned. Looking at the trade war between USA, China, and EU, and sometimes even India pops in. So there is this commotion within the trading world. Then if you look at the region itself, we all understand that international trade is so important for economic growth. We need it. We need foreign direct investments into our country. But how can we entice more FDIs to come into the Pacific if we don't adhere to the global trading rules? If we're going to shift to protectionism, there is no incentive whatsoever for the FDIs to move out because they're so comfortable. There is no competition whatsoever. So we are definitely in a situation where we need to look beyond just surviving, but how we can thrive. And this is what we will be discussing in the next 2 days during our 2 ministerial meetings. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always a challenge for the Pacific Islanders, for us to come together when it comes to trade. Because the main reason is we are all so different. We're all so different. The markets are small, based on the capacity of the country. Then what the Pacific does, we enter into various trade agreements. You've heard the ministers talk about PICTA and now PESA Plus. We are going into other trade agreements with EU. At the moment, we are with IEPA. Comprehensive EPA needs to be negotiated. We're still finding our foot forward as to how we're going to do all that, and how we have to trade carefully with EU so that whatever trade agreements we negotiate, it is mutually beneficial to both the parties. From the Pacific perspective, when the trade agreements are negotiated, I've seen for myself that normally it takes the agenda towards traditional trade agreements, which is simply, let's open up the market by eliminating tariffs. Let's more products come in because we've eliminated tariffs. But for the Pacific, that's not what we want. What we want is the development component to be part and parcel of the trade agreement. Because for the Pacific, to trade with the rest of the world, we need trade facilitation measures. Even when we produce our products, we're not able to send it to the rest of the world because of the various trade barriers. And the trade barriers are more related to sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. Most of our countries don't have labs for testing. We don't have standards, conformance, accreditation. These are all the issues that we have to juggle with. So if we're really going to go towards the path of traditional trade agreement, there is no way we will succeed. I'll just share one example with you in terms of Fiji's trade with Australia and New Zealand. And I'm going to pick up just the agricultural products. So far, New Zealand has created pathway for almost 59 agricultural products for Fiji. In other words, 59 products can enter into New Zealand market. But for Australia, it's just 29 agricultural products. What does that tell us about the market access? Why we are not able to create more pathway to send our products into Australian market? Where is the obstacle? When we look at Australia, it's 7 times bigger than New Zealand. The population is much bigger. The demands are much more. But we're not able to tap into that market. There is a struggle. So that's why my focus is not to look at traditional trade agreements, but rather trade agreements that is development focused. Thank you very much.
I think we'll begin and take quick work from here now rather than getting up and down on the podium. So ministers, first of all, thank you very much for your opening remarks. I'm sure that the scene has been set. And I think the common theme that's coming out so far in the remarks that the ministers have made is the debate between multilateralism versus protectionism. Essentially, that seems to be the essential issue. And where do small island nations like ours fit into that kind of context? And also, how do we maintain a sense of identity that's unique, that doesn't get deluged by the kind of trade agreements that are being negotiated, which are essentially extremely favorable to the developed world, and often demand things of very small nations where we don't have any comparative advantage or competitive advantage to respond. So I guess my opening question is to all three of the panelists, and that is, what is it that we can do as a united front, as a region rather than individually, which is, I guess, how do we respond to these, given that we are so small as a region, how do we respond becoming a trading bloc in itself? So any of the ministers would like to respond to that?
How can we unite as a trading bloc? There has been a trade agreement already in place called PICTA. PICTA is meant to do that. It's meant to encourage Pacific Island countries to trade amongst themselves. So the question is, did it work? And the answer is not really. Again, the question is why? And my answer is, there are certain things within the PICTA trade agreement that needs to be changed. For example, rules of origin. Also, we need to have trade facilitation measures in place. If the countries have trade facilitation measures, then we can trade globally and we can trade regionally. Being a small island countries, each one of us are a little bit careful not to lose our revenues. That revenue that is generated through duty that we collect when the products enter the country. So we need to get rid of that fear and find a way forward where we can trade amongst ourselves in a much better way.
Thank you, Maurice. Just in addition to what colleague Minister Pramila said, in terms of PICTA, yes, some of us, including Solomon Islands, we are waiting for the review on the rules of origin. The PICTA in that way is still hanging, if you like. On PACER Plus, the beauty of PACER Plus is that there is a development component to it, and that is important, and that's what we have heard. It does cover goods and services, but also areas like labor mobility, which is also included under PACER Plus. And there is also that opportunity for small countries under PACER Plus, of course, with the support of Australia and New Zealand, for us to explore initiatives in terms of quality infrastructure, which is important in terms of preparing ourselves as a region or as a country in terms of trade. When I said quality infrastructure, it does not only cover good roads, communication, and electricity, but also policy and regulations that need to be in place in order to facilitate trade. Even at the sub-regional level, in terms of the Melanesian Spearhead Group agreement, that itself as well is still a lot of work needs to be done in terms of improving that agreement. And as we have heard, sometimes it is a balancing act in terms of working as a region, but also on the other hand, since we are at slightly different stages of development, it is important to note in this case that it is the private sector and the industries that produce goods for trade, and profit making is the ultimate objective. So that balance is also important for us to take into account in terms of the discussion on regionalism. But going back to regionalism and how it can support our transition from trying to survive and going into thriving, I believe regionalism has an important role to play. That role in terms of focusing and prioritizing our region's attention to the common agenda and shared goals and values that we have. And therein comes those trade agreements as examples of regional cooperation or regionalism. So there is a fair way to go in terms of us as countries and as a region to be better prepared in order for us to compete in the global trading system. Thank you.
Just to add on to my fellow ministers, how do we compete in the world trade? For me, the simple answer is we have to be a united front. We have to be a region, and a consolidated region. We've had PICTA as our trade agreement. That's been in existence now for, well, I suppose nearly 20 years. And there are countries that are still not in that agreement for various reasons and valid reasons. And why are they still outside that agreement? These are the matters that need to be reviewed in the upcoming review of PICTA, so that we can alleviate all the fears and address all the issues that these countries who have not entered into PICTA, so that those issues can be resolved, and let's unite under an agreement so we can all start trading as a region. I think if we go individually, we won't get anywhere. We have to present as a trading body a region, a Pacific region, a blue Pacific region for that matter. We have got all the resources in the sea. We have the fisheries, our most abundant, and we have different agreements and different ways of utilizing that. Why can't we bring them all together so that we stand as a region, we stand as the owner of the most abundant fisheries in the world? I think that's for me the way that we can show the world that we are serious about trade, and they don't just push us around. We have to make them believe and prove to them that we can trade, and the quality of our goods are up of the best, and we can safely say that we have accommodated all the needs of their quarantine requirements, and that requires development from within our own countries, and we need to do that if we are to be recognized as a serious trading body in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers. Just another question that comes to mind is, whenever there seems to be chaos in a system, as we have currently in the WTO, with perhaps even some predicting some sort of collapse of the WTO, there are always opportunities, and similarly with the EU facing its own problems with Brexit and the renewed interest, particularly of the UK within the region. Do you see any opportunities for a different kind of bilateral agreements where that kind of chaos is ensuing?
Most governments rely on bilateral relationship, and they would prefer to enter into bilateral agreements, whether it's trade or even development, any form of assistance for that matter. There is opportunity, of course, when there is chaos in the marketplace, but we don't really know how it's going to unfold. That is something we have to wait and watch. No one thought that WTO one day will be questioned, which is made up of member countries who had set the global trade rules. And that's been questioned today and challenged, in fact. I believe that within the Pacific region, Fiji is now ready to enter into a bilateral trade agreement with Australia and New Zealand. That's my view. The reason being that we are different from the rest of the Pacific. And if you look at our trade statistics, it speaks itself. So we cannot be tied down with other regional trade agreements. I believe that the region needs to relook at itself, because we are not homogeneous. Each country is not the same. Our needs are different. We are at different stages of development. And I think this is where even I feel that the Forum Secretariat needs to look carefully. And my view is that whatever kind of assistance or policies that you want to assist with the countries, it cannot be one size fits all. It has to be what the needs of the group is, or which countries need assistance in a particular area. And that's how we need to do a grouping, so that we can assist them on one-to-one level for them to do things better in that particular area. I'll give you an example in terms of Fiji. At least we have standards, meteorology, we've got few labs around. We don't need policy, we've got laws, we don't need a model law. In terms of capacity, not really, because we are a member of ISO. All kinds of training is provided to us from that perspective. But what we need is really the development assistance. How do we set up the lab, or what kind of testing we can do, which lab would be better to do a particular test as compared to the other lab. So this is where the assistance is needed, accreditation, conformance. We need assistance in that area. And if we can get assistance in that area, it will be more beneficial to Fiji than to start off with step number one, that is, let's look at the law and the policy. We are beyond that.
Thank you. As a LDC and a member of the WTO, I believe the WTO, being a rules-based trading system, remains an important one for small island developing states and vulnerable economies in the world, including us in the Pacific. Of course, I do note and acknowledge that we could be at different levels and stages of development, but for LDC countries, the WTO, which is under a lot of pressure by protectionism and other forces, remains a relevant one. I think it's important that the Pacific and the wider WTO membership takes a united stand in terms of see how best we can rescue the situation. Otherwise, for LDCs and vulnerable economies, sometimes the bilateral arrangements that are done by bigger countries, I'm not referring here to Australia or Fiji and other countries, but probably China and the US, for example. These are much, much bigger economies, and they may set different higher standards, which may not be easy for us to comply with. So the WTO, being an organization that advocates for market access, setting rules to ensure fair play and monitoring adherence or compliance, and even having dispute settlement mechanisms in place, or creating networks to create and exchange knowledge remains important for us. But I take the point that my colleague Minister of Fiji said, that back in country, or in country, we are still struggling with the basics in terms of improving quarantine and biosecurity regulations. That is still a lot of work on that front in terms of what we are trying to do in the Solomons. Or even tax reforms that could attract foreign direct investment. These are internal measures that each country needs to take. I mean, others are quite ahead, others are still coming from behind. The point in terms of yes, regionalism, but looking at country specifics, I think that is important. As I've said, we are at different stages, and we hope that the forum sector will continue to know that as much as we appreciate regional efforts and initiatives to help the region, but let's not forget also the particular cases of each of the countries in the region. Thank you.
Just to add on to comments, I think multilateralism, the system that we have now on the WTO, is the most appropriate for us as regional small trading powers. We are protected under the rules. It's rules-based, and they have bodies the appellate bodies that looks at all cases that come before WTO, and I think they offer more protection for us as a region than the protectionism concept that is being brought forward by some very powerful nations. The chaos in the EU, well, I know EPAs were discussed almost 20 years ago, and as it developed, it became apparent that we were not going to get a regional EPA. So we were encouraged to look at interim EPAs, and Fiji and Papua New Guinea were the first to secure EPAs, and now Samoa has joined, and other countries are now also negotiating interim EPAs with the Europeans. So there are advantages that have come out of the fact that we didn't reach an agreement for almost 20 years. So the way forward for and I hope that we are going to have a united stand at the MC12 in June, where we are going to have to provide a strong message at the meeting that this is our stance. We support multilateralism or whatever, and these are the reasons why, and we stick to that because I think if we go under protectionism, then we might find ourselves lost in the ideals of the much stronger and richer countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers. It's obvious that the next 2 days will be crucial as you know, these things will be teased out. As you can see, there are certain differences between the three positions. But Ministers, I'd like to, all of you have talked about the need for foreign direct investment. And the question really is, and we are sitting in a university, so I'm going to take the opportunity to push this a little bit to say, what is the right kind of foreign direct investment that we need? So for example, in Fiji, we have an amazing scheme that the Fiji government has introduced for research and development in the country. So for every dollar that a company invests in Fiji in R&D, there's I think $2 tax credit for R&D. Now that's a very, very innovative way of attracting a different kind of investment and preparing the economy for the future. So I'm wondering how this tallies up with, on the one hand, our desire to move in that direction, and yet on the other hand, our Pacific labor mobility schemes, which are very vital to some of our countries at the moment. Especially our Polynesian countries are providing a very important proportion of skilled labor, and of course there's already been discussions about a labor drain, a brain drain from our region. So I was just wondering if you had some comments to reflect on how we get the right kind of investment in the country that prepares us for the next decade. And you know, we know, for example, that in the world the intersection between infotech and biotech will make a completely different need for the skills that the economies in the world will need. And if we don't get that kind of investment, which is usually centered around a university, how will we tackle that challenge?
Fiji is preparing itself in terms of looking at the foreign investment policy that we had from 1999, and we are of the view that, of course, this policy is outdated. We need to develop a policy that is more investor-friendly. One of the discrimination that we saw within the policy was that we were only rolling the red carpet to foreign investors and not to the local investors. And we realized that whenever there was a problem, it was the local investors who had the confidence to spend in the country and contribute to the economic growth. So we're getting rid of the name Foreign Investment Act, but we're going to call it Investment Act. And we want to create various provision within the law where the investors can, if they get into trouble, there's a dispute resolution process in it. We're going to, not like previously, we had a very restrictive type of investment act. Similarly, even the investment Fiji was more from the established to look at policing and facilitating. Now we want them to be more a promotion agency. So these are major changes that's going to take place within investment Fiji and the law itself. Now coming back to the type of investment that we would like to attract, Fiji is preparing itself for the digital transformation. Work has already started. We want to go digital for various services. You have seen for yourself that we have got the BIS portal now to assist private sector, anything related to businesses. They can start a business by going to BIS portal and getting all the information from there. And also related to if they want a construction permit, again, that's the site. Besides all that, now we are able to get the birth certificate, the passport, and many other things through e-portal. So that's the idea, that we have to move in that direction. Now, if we want to move in that direction, definitely we're looking at
how we can attract more foreign investors in that area, or even incentivizing the local investors to go into ICT area. So for us, that's one big area that we are targeting at this stage. Research and development, as you have said, VC, yes, we realize that research and development is very important if you want to be innovative, just to have that cutting edge when it comes to product development and so forth. Coming down to brain drain and labor mobility, yes, that was a language that was used previously, and it was used, within the Pacific we used to talk about brain drain. But these days, I wouldn't be using the word brain drain, I'll be calling it brain gain. Because now we have opened our doors. We're inviting professionals outside Fiji to come and work in Fiji. So the labor mobility is not about just sending our people out of the Pacific region for work purposes, but in fact we realize the importance of labor being a very important factor when it comes to development and for the economic growth. So for that reason, Fiji has set up a SPAC committee. It's a committee where the private sector or anyone who can put in the application and say, well, this is the specific skill that I need for my business. And the SPAC body can make the decision. So this is to fast track and to ensure that the private sector is not constrained. They cannot innovate, they cannot be creative just because they don't have a particular skill set. So we're taking another direction altogether. Having said all that, for labor mobility, I believe that we need to have a regional labor mobility body or a group or a committee that can look after the needs of the region. Reason being, from Fiji, there are people working in Cook Islands, people working in Samoa, and vice versa. So we need to have this particular committee where we can look at the needs of the laborers who move from one place to another for work purposes. So these are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. In the case of the Solomons, 2 points in terms of foreign direct investment. Number one, foreign investors come in when you have the existing infrastructure in terms of utilities. Electricity, for example, is very expensive, I think among the highest in the region, and that affects industry. And I hope with the coming on stream of the Tina Hydro project in 2024, that will reduce the cost of energy, thereby encouraging investors to come in. Communications is equally important. And there is also another project that has just opened, the fiber optic cable, and that gives opportunities in terms of e-commerce and e-business. Second point, there are also reforms that we are undertaking to encourage foreign investors or foreign investment, especially in the tax reforms. We are looking at reforming the tax regime. At the moment, there is a bill now before Cabinet in terms of a tax administration bill that can pull together the different taxes, the sales income tax and also the goods tax, and working towards value-added tax. And I think countries like Fiji are already there in terms of value-added tax. So a twin approach in terms of ensuring that we have the necessary strong or hard infrastructure in place, but also the necessary legislative reforms and policy reforms are undertaken. In terms of what type of investment, we would like to ensure that the investment, the local population does take part in those investments or joint ventures. So that is, again, a win-win situation for both the investor and the local population. We are still facing land-related reforms as well. And so reforms in terms of land ownership has been one of the obstacles in the Solomons that is ongoing. I think these are all challenges that we are facing, but steps are being taken to ensure that we are able to be in a position to attract foreign direct investment, which is important in terms of driving the economy forward.
Thank you. In the case of Samoa, we encourage foreign investors to come in, but we have a body that considers their applications and look at what the investor has to offer. Lately, it's been mainly investing in retail shops to the point where we are now inundated with retail shops. So we've had to change our focus. Now we look at possible investors in the context of what the priorities of Samoa is. Right now, we have put a stop on, we're putting the brakes on retail investors, and we're encouraging foreign investors in areas of construction, major construction and airports and ports, to look at where we want to be in the next 10, 15 years. We encourage investors in certain areas like tourism by offering them concessional duties if they're coming in to build a hotel. Even in the tourism sector, while we want to develop the tourism sector, we also want to control the activities of the investors. For example, we've had few investors turned back or turned down because they wanted to build 50-story hotels in areas, out in outer villages, on the beaches, and we've decided that's not what we want. That's not Samoa that we want. That we give them a maximum of 6 to 7 stories, and that's it. We don't want to be like other countries where big hotel complexes have taken over and the identity of our country is lost. So we've had to be very selective. So in our case, we've realized that there's lots of people wanting to come and invest, especially in the tourism area, but we are now controlling the level of the investment that can be done. Our other area is in the retail section. Our policy is that for every foreign worker that works in the business, 5 local workers have to work there. So if they bring in free workers, we expect 15 local workers to be employed in that investment. So that's the way of ensuring that employment is given to local people, and because we were seeing that some of the investors that come in, they bring their own labor force, and that wasn't helping us. So those are some of the measures that we put in. We also have what we call a reserved list. There are certain businesses that we do not allow foreigners to carry out in Samoa, and those are preserved only for local companies so that they have a chance to survive as well. Thank you.
Sorry, just a point on labor mobility. Of course, we welcome Solomon Islands welcome the various opportunities under the labor mobility arrangements we have with our friends, Australia and New Zealand, but also the potential to explore similar opportunities with other countries. And I think this is a subject of discussion that ministers will be looking at during the Forum Trade Ministers meeting on Thursday. We have a youth bulge, a huge youth population, and the opportunities under the current labor schemes that we have with Australia and New Zealand not only help to relieve the pressure on unemployment, but such schemes also offer opportunities for young people to learn new skills. And when they come back, they can start their own businesses, and that is happening. Learning new skills, and of course, contributing to the economy by way of the returns or the income that they earn. But as my colleague here said, it's a two-way process. We send people out, but we also welcome people to come in areas where we don't have the capacity in our country. The idea of setting up a regional office to manage and coordinate that, we are also in support of that initiative. And again, I think this is an initiative that ministers will also be looking at during the course of our meetings this week. Bike on investment, yes, we do have a Foreign Investment Act that tries to manage some of these investment-related activities. And we are yet to reach the stage where, for example, we look at providing tax incentives or tax holiday incentives. This will be part of our upcoming, part of our tax reforms as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ministers. I think it's now time to open up to our audience and welcome questions from the audience. Is there somebody with a mic who'll be going around, or? Brilliant. So please, we'll take questions from anybody in the audience. Right at the back there, yep.
Vice-Chancellor's requirement. So I'll try to be very brief. I have a couple of questions, and I draw from the comments that have been made by the Honourable Ministers. And they've all identified these challenges. All it seems to be related to what's coming from outside. The multilateral versus protectionism, the different stages of development, and also the need for some consistency in the policies amongst within the region. And I'm very glad and delighted that you are all in unison on reinforcing the unity of our region in face of all these odds. The question that I have, one, the elephants that are not here, our bigger sisters and brothers. We are working with them, Australia and New Zealand. Are they participating? Because I see that a lot of these things are being channeled through them, and also the markets are also there, not only for the goods but also for our labor. Possibly the only thing that we have that we're really good at selling are our people. And the second thing is, all of you mentioned the need for competition. And I think that's something that also universities and institutions of learning are also very concerned about, making sure that our students and our graduates are competitive and are able to stand their ground when they're out there. And it's good to see that some of them are already there as leaders. The specific question is, yes, we need to compete, But are there conditions for also competition within our region? Are there conditions for our capacity to compete amongst ourselves? There are some things that, of course, Fiji produces. Can they come in too, go to other places, to other countries? We have a situation here with some of our students who are postgraduates, and they need to go out and explore and gain some experience out with the industries and the stakeholders. But there are some requirements that inhibit our regional students to obtain that kind of experience, not only here, but we also have students outside in other member countries where the need for them to get out into the workforce and not only conduct their research, the experiments, but also to earn some money and to acquire some entrepreneurial skills. So are there some thoughts in creating the kinds of conditions in order for our people to compete amongst themselves inside, even before they go outside?
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. I'm not sure I got it all, but I'll try and respond. First, you're talking about the bigger players in the region, in Australia and New Zealand. They are part of the forum, and they, you know, we hope to be able to discuss the issues that we are generally in agreement amongst the states, smaller states, and our leaders in the forum space, interacting with Australia and New Zealand. They are bigger players, and they have bigger influences in our small region, but I'm not sure whether there are any particular areas within our region where Australia and New Zealand are totally out of line with what the rest of the smaller island states have in their interest in. I stand to be corrected, but from my point of view, I think we are working in unison with them, and they are supporting us in a lot of areas that we, smaller island states, need their support in. As far as competing, again, I'm not sure I've got your question correctly, but you seem to be thinking what's stopping like graduates from here going across to Samoa, gain experience there, and then moving on to Tahiti and moving on to that kind of thing. Again, I'm sure that these are issues that could be discussed at the forum level. If the need can be, like fellow minister was talking about, the labor mobility, whether the exchange, people going out and coming into countries, whether that is an avenue that could be used for the exchange of expertise, and also to give the students and the graduates opportunities to develop themselves within the region before they start looking outside. We hope they're going to stay in the region. We don't want to lose all our smart people going outside overseas. We want to keep them in the region. And if we can do that by giving them more opportunities to learn and to build their capacity and build their skills in other countries, I don't really see why we should be putting barriers on their way. But there could be other issues beyond that, but for me, we should be encouraging exchange of students, exchange of graduates, so that they learn before they go out to the bigger world and become you know, the people they strive to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in addition to what my colleague said, in terms of the collaboration and partnership that we have with our big partners, Australia and New Zealand, of course, they're part of the forum, and of course, the other crop agencies. Under the PACER Plus arrangement, there are opportunities where both Australia and New Zealand is part of. There are opportunities for collaboration, especially in terms of putting in place the necessary infrastructure in terms of quarantine or biosecurity. Those sort of requirements, we will be working closely with them. During the next couple of days, this will be raised in our meetings. On student, I was going to ask whether, Vice Chancellor, we do have programs on student exchanges between USP and other institutions in the region. I understand in the past we used to have. I used to study in Papua New Guinea, then I come and complete it here at the USP and apply for cross credit, whether those arrangements are in place. Because either you look for work opportunities after you graduate, or those student exchanges are equally important opportunities for our countries to know more about themselves, more about the region. Third point, we also need to encourage our students. I say this to my colleagues in the Solomons that every year we have challenges to do with scholarship applications for SIG scholarships. But there are also scholarship opportunities offered by other countries, non-traditional partners in Africa or in Asia. And there is a tendency for students to concentrate, look only to SIG scholarships. But I think it's equally important, while we would like to retain our people in the region and in country, we would also like to expose them to the globe so that they can become competitive in the global workforce. At the end of the day, we may lose them, but somehow they will also contribute back to the country. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'll be speaking on 2 points here. One is how vibrant our private sector is in the region that can offer attachment to our students. This is happening in Fiji, as you know. Students do go for attachments. FNU is one institution that sends students for attachment. I'm not sure about USP, so I can't comment on that. But again, a lot of reliance is there on the private sector to give them the work experience. But from a government perspective, we have been sending our retired teachers and other retired professionals out into the region. They're working in various other island countries, contributing to their development, which we feel good about. In terms of conditioning the students to compete, that's a very valid point. My question is whether the universities are really doing that. Are they really conditioning the students to compete? Because what we see, when the students come out after the graduation, there is only one thing in their mind, and that is, I'm looking for a job. So they become job seekers. When are we going to turn them into job creators? And for us to make them job creators, we need to provide them with the right environment, the right tools. And there is one such, you can say, a program initiated by Fiji government, is the YES program. This is for the young people who want to start a business with very innovative ideas. And this is a very lucrative area. You know, when young people are together, they think differently, they can come up with a very creative project, and often the ideas are there, but when you don't have money to support that idea, you'll go nowhere. But this is a project which is simply saying, okay, if you have a good idea which will be vetted by the private sector, then we're going to put that money for you to develop that idea. So we need to move away from job seekers to job creators.
I think there are other people who would like to give an opportunity to. While we're looking for the next person who'd like to question, I'll just answer the two ministers. Minister, you'll be pleased to know that at USP, We have many such programs. We have an innovation hub here where we are working very hard to train people to become entrepreneurs. This is a program we began in partnership with UNDP. And of course, we strongly encourage attachments, and we strongly encourage our students to move from one part of the region to another. Of course, these are difficult things given our context in terms of the financial resources that our students have to be able to do these kinds of exchanges. But wherever possible, the university does facilitate these. The other questions? Oh, here we go.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Bingo Tama from South African High Commission. I have two questions. They are follow-up to the comments made by honorable ministers. The first question, I would like to direct it to Honorable Minister Kumar. You talked about the fact that you are not homogeneous in the region. Is that not a valid reason for you to strive for more regional unity? Because the more heterogeneous or different you are, the more it is compelling for you to unite. I think it that is the logic. And don't you think that Fiji has a natural responsibility to lead if other island countries are still behind in terms of levels of development? That's the first question. The second question is about identity. While it's directed to Honorable Minister from Samoa, while the island countries are striving for country identity, don't you think it is becoming more compelling as well to strive for regional identity? You know, it took just to provide a basis for my questions briefly. It took EU more than 60 years to be where it is today. They had problems. It was founded by merely 6 countries, which were not homogeneous, and it grew up to 28 countries, until we see UK, which also joined late, now exceeding. But it also took United States of America more than 200 years to be where it is, as a union itself. Still, they still having problems of identity. Notwithstanding, they still want to position themselves as a united country with unique identity. It took Africa more than 50 years to be where it is. They're still struggling to assume that unity, that absolute unity that we want. So I think this region is still at its nascent stage, but we dare not linger. Let's proceed. Let's strive towards more regionalism. That will help. It will add to more economies of scale, and it will attract more investment than you ever thought of. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Ambassador. In fact, I don't know how you drew that conclusion that I was trying to allude towards Fiji being away from the region. What I'm trying to say here is that as a region, you've seen it. I mean, you've answered your own question by giving the example of EU. We can see what happened in EU, right? With Brexit as an example. And we don't know, we cannot foresee, we cannot talk about what's going to happen in the future. We can maintain a regionalism, and we need to be thinking not with emotions, but with facts and figures. That's my belief. It's no point being emotional about issues when it's not going to bring any gain to the region. If you're going to think that way, there's going to be a lot of waste of money. And a good example that I can talk about today is the Pacific Plan. Pacific Plan was introduced by the leaders purely from the regional perspective to bring everyone together, to create that block. It never happened. Now we are slowly moving towards the regional framework. So Fiji is not saying that we want to do things on our own. No. The whole discussion is about regionalism. We are part of this region. We will remain in that region. Our brotherhood and sisterhood will remain as it is. And Fiji is again helping the other Pacific Island countries wherever it's possible. And vice versa, we also come together under MSG. We share our views together. But if we want to seriously use the money well from the regional perspective, let's use it purely from national needs perspective, where again, if 5 countries from the region come together, it'll be more valuable for them to gain from a project rather than spreading it thinly and not really reaching the objective that one is trying to achieve. So that's what I think about regionalism. Regionalism is very important. We have been doing things together from climate change perspective to when we talk about various other treaties and conventions, we have stick together and we're trying to be together under the PICTA trade agreement, you know, to work together. But my major concern, and I'll be honest today, is about the regional organization, right? From the regional perspective, we have to ensure that really the people, the grassroots, they gain from those projects. It is not used up just for consultancies, for the workshops, for get-togethers, or to come up with products such as model legislation or model regulation. It's not beneficial. And as I said previously, capacity building. Most of the Pacific Island countries, we are part of various other conventions and treaties where individually we gain that experience. Like being a member of WTO, being a member of ISO, we gain that capacity. So we have to tread very carefully because the resources are limited, the demands are more, and we have to use facts and evidence to make that decision.
Thank you for your observation or from my comments. Honourable Minister has provided the perspective from her statement, and I don't think we are at odds here with our view of regionalism, and she has said that. I think we can be a region without losing identity, individual identities. We can act together as a region where things are for the benefit of the region and still maintain your sovereign right to certain things that, or developments that will be beneficial for your particular country as a people. So I don't think my comment saying that we need to come together is in all-encompassing. We look at areas where, as a region, we will benefit, but we also look at areas where, as an individual country, you can benefit from being that country and doing things the way that you want without jeopardizing the regional approach. I hope and we're young as you say, it took you 50 years, and so the regional idea is still in its infancy compared to some of the bigger countries that have gone through the same process. So I'm sure we will learn as we go, and we will, in the Pacific way, come out with a Pacific solution. Thank you.
The other questions? Oh, back here.
My name is Masaso Paunga. I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor for Regional Campuses, Estates and Infrastructure at the USB. Moderator and also Honorable Ministers, this is a very delighting evening for all of us. It gives us a lot of hope when we're looking at a title, Pacific Trading Nation, from surviving to thriving. That's all we are all hoping for, and we all look forward to your meeting to be held in a couple of days. I got only one question, but before that, I'd like to thank you, just not only by observation, by observing, but just through from your comments. It seems to me that we have those of you that be in the regional side of things, and the other one on the individual side of things, which is very normal. But looking back to what has been going on in the past 20 years, when we're looking at the beginning of PICTA, PESA, now developed to PESA Plus. In addition, we look over the EPA together with European countries. Somehow it kind of saddened me to a certain extent. And the solution has to be with you, honorable ministers from the countries. The time more than 20 years ago when we were looking at the regionality or to look at the regional front, that was when the Americans were looking at NAFTA. The European countries were looking at their own. And for the Pacific Islands, individually, they know they're going to be losing out until we create a trading bloc, which is the Pacific Forum bloc. And the idea at the time when we were doing or when we were starting with the PICTA was internally and trying to get everybody together. We know that PICTA and everything over there is not going to be positive for everyone. But the idea was to get everybody together, improve the internal trade, and hopefully we're going to create more prosperous for every country. We even went further to the WTO. Some of us were already there after the GATT and became WTO members. Some of our island countries had to go through the risky system of trying to apply and got in. We also came up with the ACP when we developed the EPAs. And what saddens me is that when we go there as a group, what the Honorable Minister of Fiji is talking about, I fully support, and I'm very happy for that, because you can see it in here in Fiji. The developments here in Fiji, you can also see it in Samoa, how you do bilateral trading on your own, and it really develops your country. When we are looking from getting into the regional perspective, how can we take as much as we can from the European trade? Hence the establishment of the EPA or the European or the Economic Partnership Agreement. The idea was for us to be together. Up to a stage now, past few years, Papua New Guinea, Fiji is moving out. As you rightly mentioned, Honorable Minister from Samoa, Samoa is going to join in to start this, restart again this spirit of cooperation. We have 79 countries as ACP members. Among the three, For the African countries, the Caribbean countries, they all got together in those two regional parts. They all agree. So they get the most benefit from the EPA. In the Pacific, you mentioned earlier, two of our countries kind of getting out of it. And my question is, why can't we be together? We all know about PICTA. We all know about PESA, PESA Plus. The status of development in each country is very, very limited. I mean, it's very, very diverse. And there is no, you rightly said it, Honorable Minister from Fiji, there is no one plan fits all. We are all at different level. But when we are trying to capture something over there from the EU together, the idea was not that every individual country will be able to benefit from that. And what I still question to myself, how come that PNG and Fiji pulled out and went on their own, and not the other islands supporting Fiji and PNG? Now Samoa are going to be joining as a third one. Now we are trying to regroup again. We are already in a very weak stage. And my thinking, my question, we already know there are some that are viable and some that are non-viable in terms of trade. But I think if we can get together as a group, as a region, regardless of our differences, but as a regional group to go and say yes together, and whatever goods that we receive, like mentioned earlier, if there are 3, 4, 5 countries that benefit from that, the problem is that piece of love, that those countries that benefit from that are not being distributed to the rest of the region. And that's the problem. We know very well we cannot go individually on our own and negotiate and get something for the whole Pacific. I mean, for us alone. We need the cooperation of everyone. And I'm asking you, Honorable Ministers, we need to not to lose track of looking at the big picture. There are certain things that we can do individually on a bilateral levels. And there are certain things that are going to benefit us all. And my question is, will you be able to gather together as a region, as a regional trading bloc, so that we can move forward together? And not only that, it's not only the success of the trade, or what we're going to get out of it, but to be able to share it with the less capable countries that are not able to trade. Same model that is currently going on with the USP as a regional institution. Some are viable, some are non-viable. But the fact that we all move together, we are able to kind of cross-subsidize and share each other and try to make everybody survive. And again, my question is, will you be able to go together as a group for the goal of a regional trading bloc? Thank you very much.
I think I have to get rid of various misconceptions that has been created during this panel discussion. We have been in the trading bloc as a region. That's why we're talking about PICTA. We have been negotiating various trade agreements collectively. But when it comes to comprehensive EPA negotiation, you know, when it started off and then it was suspended for 3 years, Fiji and PNG had no option but to sign up for IEPA, interim EPA, because we didn't want any trade disruptions. We wanted quota-free, duty-free access to our sugar and to our fisheries products. That's the reason. We had to safeguard our trade. In terms of what each country can do, it's their sovereign right. As a sovereign state, you make a decision, and often decisions are made through cabinet, what you intend to do. And I have seen at no stage whatsoever regionalism, Pacific regionalism has been questioned. I think as a region, we have stood solid on a number of issues that the region faced. And even at the international level, we have dealt with it.
They cannot do what Fiji and PNG can do. Why don't they all move together with you and support only you? To go together as a region, rather than, because now we are having an interim. It doesn't sound right. Something is not really good. It doesn't put us as a region altogether. Why don't the other Pacific islands come together and support you to make sure that your trade can go well? And when you get those opportunities, share
Would you like to?
with other countries.
Would you like to answer that? I can still argue with you on the same subject. Not necessarily that there's countries at different stages, as I said, the least developed, developing, and of course, the developed countries. So in this particular case, when it came to ACP, Fiji has been trading with EU because of UK. And our main trading partner has always been UK. And even if you look at the trade statistics, it will reveal that majority of our exports go to UK and not to EU bloc. So this was the last minute decision one had to make, because if we don't, we lose out. So that's why it's called interim. It will be further negotiated, so it was left at that stage. And I'm sure there are other countries who will be joining in. But perhaps at that time they didn't see any reason as to why they need to join. Fiji, it was simply a trade facilitation process.
Thank you for your very enlightening comments. Obviously, you have been involved with a lot of these developments that you were talking about. The idea, I think, as you would acknowledge, that was exactly the idea of EPA for the region. But it took 16 years, and it never went anywhere. And the world is moving forward. The world is developing, and good on Fiji and PNG. They had trading commodities that they needed to trade. And if we were waiting around for the regional EPA to be signed, when I said, well, I think it was 2004, and it was, it was just going nowhere, as you're aware. So we've had to make decisions for the betterment of our country as well. And I think we were encouraged to go and seek interim agreements with Europe. And that's what we've done. And we encourage others as well. I don't think us tagging along with Fiji and PNG, IEPA, is going to be a solution. Not for Fiji and PNG, but especially not for us, who will be tagging along and hoping that things are successful, and then we get benefits from them. I think we need to make those kind of decisions for your own country as an individual. But it doesn't lose, as my colleague, the minister, it doesn't lose the regionalism context that we try to portray, and we want the world to portray. As I said, there are certain issues where you have to look at individually as a sovereign state and say, this is where, for the betterment of this country, this is where we have to go. But it doesn't lose your regionalism context when it comes to the bigger picture and the world stage. Thank you.
Thank you. think, honourable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, this... Oh.
Thank you. Just in addition to what my colleague ministers have said, thank you for the observations that you have made, and obviously you've been in the process in terms of those negotiations. I think Solomon Islands, you would recall, we were sort of lead spokesmen for IPA for quite a while after PNG and Fiji concluded IPAs with the EU, and Samoa is on board. We are next. I think the EU Parliament has just agreed to the Solomon's IPA arrangement, so we are formalizing that this year. And it's basically because of our fisheries exports to the European Union. And it is also part of our preparations for graduation from the list of LDCs. So we have to prepare ourselves, and that is part of our preparations, having that IEPA with the European Union. But as colleagues have said, that does not mean that we are no longer with the region. We'll continue to collaborate and work closely with the region in various forums. So that balance, I think, is important when sovereign interests really at stake. The government or the cabinet at that time has to make those decisions. But as a country, as a member of the forum, we will continue to work closely with the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the panel discussion, and you'll agree with me that the discussions have been very enlightening and have given us food for thought for enhancing trade not only within the region, but also with our partners with whom the region has trade agreements and arrangements. So let me thank you all for coming this evening to USB. We're very pleased to be able to hold this forum. And let me thank our honourable ministers on the panel for their frank comments, the PIF's Deputy Secretary General and staff, and Ministry of Industry, Trade and Tourism staff for organising this event at USB. I also wish finally to thank all of you again. I mean, this panel would not have been possible if you all hadn't been here this evening. And finally, wish the officials and ministers productive meetings over the next 2 days. Vinaka, Pafatai, and thank you, Thomas. I now hand back to our MC.
Thank you, Honourable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our evening's program. We have refreshments outside at the lower level for Honourable Ministers and dignitaries, and at the higher level for the rest of the audience. Thank you very much, and have a good night.